everyone. My name is Pai, CEO and partner of venture capital at SCB 10X. I'm excited to be here with you, co-founder and CEO of KAITO AI. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we dive into the main topic about web research, I would like to learn more about you and your background. Could you share a bit about your journey and experience that have led you to become an expert in this field? And what is the driving force behind the creation of KAITO?
Yeah, happy to. So my name is Yuhu. I'm the founder and CEO of KAITO. I spent around about 10 years in traditional finance before I started KAITO. Prior to KAITO, I was a manager portfolio at Citadel. So spent a lot of my time in public equities market trading stocks across Europe and the US. Obviously, throughout that process, my time at Citadel, I had to spend a lot of time going through a lot of the public documentations and doing deep dive research into every single stock. I got very, very interested in crypto starting from 2017, and I got a lot more involved through DeFi Summer, so in 2020. Through that period of time, DeFi was obviously was kind of the closest resemblance versus public stock, where DeFi actually had actual earnings. I got very, very interested in analyzing all the DeFi stocks. But during that period of time, I started realizing doing research in the space is extremely difficult because information just all over the place. Google is very horrific in terms of whenever it comes to kind of a Web3 search, and Twitter search is also extremely difficult to use. So I started thinking about an idea of building a search engine for the whole space. And that was the original motivation of me starting out, quit my job at Citadel and start building KAITO. So that was, back in 2021. And then fast forward around about 2-3 years, we just launched the KAITO, the institutional facing platform around about 3-4 months ago. And today we serve around about 200 institutions in the space, ranging from liquid funds, VCs, market makers, exchanges, and increasing a lot of the project teams, such as Ethereum Foundation, Polygon, Eigenlayer, etc.
Wow, that's an inspiring journey. Given that you only launched like in 3 months and get already 200 customers. So now I would like to focus our conversation on KAITO and its role in the web research. What are your long-term goals and aspirations for KAITO? Like, how does KAITO aim to revolutionize the way research and interact with Web3 data?
Yeah, so I guess a bit of a funny backstory is when KAITO first started, I remember in our first pitch deck, we never really had a word AI. To us, it was very intuitive in terms of what we're doing, right? So we're building a search engine, and AI wasn't a buzzword. But we always had that AI mentality in terms of whenever it comes to stuff that we do and stuff that we don't do. And our mission has always been to democratize information access in the space. Round about, I would say, 6 to 10 months into kind of the initial starting phase of KAITO, OpenAI launched ChatGPT. And that was really kind of a revolutionary in terms of the final user experience and how people are interacting with information. And then we very, very quickly adapted to that kind of a new regime. So on top of the search engine, then we start to embrace a large language model in pretty much every process of data cleaning, data injection, and synthesizing of information, and the final kind of user interface with information. So our goal has always been to kind of democratize information access to everyone in the space. And then we've been kind of getting closer and closer in terms of realizing that mission, I'll say, along the journey.
That's fascinating. I think before we dig deeper into the LLM piece, I think maybe just would like to provide the audience a general understanding of like KAITO's offering. Can you walk us through like the products and service offered by KAITO today, and highlight some unique features that enable better discovery of crypto-related data?
Yeah. Happy to. So we currently have, I'll say, two products. One is currently in the market already, and the other one is currently in the process of developing. So the first product that we launched right about 3-4 months ago is essentially a institutional search engine that everyone can essentially search for information across the entire space. The type of information that we typically index include all the Twitter, crypto Twitter information, Farcaster, Discord, Telegram, Medium, Mirror, a lot of the research in the space, governance forums, snapshot votes, including on-chain and off-chain votes, all that kind of stuff, and documentations, all that kind of stuff. And then typically this type of information is scattered across thousands of different places, right? So you have to open. So for example, there's no, people were not able to simply search across hundreds of governance forums. People are not able to search across hundreds or thousands of different discords. We made that possible by indexing all the information that is either completely public or semi-public in various different domains. So that's, the kind of the bulk of what we do. And then with that, that's kind of the fundamental search layer that we built. And on top of that, we built a lot of the analytics stuff. So things like token mindshare, things like sentiment analytics, things like smartphone tracking, all that kind of stuff is essentially built on top of the fundamental search engine, but then that abstracts away all the actual details of what people are talking about for every single token. But actually, for example, like sentiment analytics would just be abstracting away the actual details, but then showing the sentiment for every single token as well as for the whole market. Token mindshare is a great metric, either for liquid funds to assess risk reward for any specific token, but also a great metric for any project teams in this space to track how well they've been gaining in terms of social momentum, in terms of assessing whether a certain marketing campaign has been effective or not. So that's kind of a lot of the features or a lot of the metrics that we pioneered on top of the fundamental search layer that we built.
Yeah, I think the mindshare is interesting metric that KAITO monitors. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for the meme coins that have been a dominant crypto narrative this year. Considering the volatile and community-driven nature of meme coins, does KAITO approach these meme coins differently when it comes to analyzing and providing insights? And what metrics should we monitor on KAITO for these coins?
Yeah, it's a very interesting angle, obviously. So regarding meme coin, the multiple things that we have done and also the few things that we are doing right now. First things first, KAITO as a search engine is built for general purpose, right? So it's either it is not just covering meme coins, obviously. We cover pretty much all the discussions in the space. You can also be searching for very generic topics, research topics, let's say, for example, account abstraction, chain abstraction, all that kind of stuff, and then be able to get very good results. But meme coins specifically, obviously the few major characteristics. One is it's extremely social and sentiment driven. And we've seen a lot of the correlations and back testing and all that kind of stuff. And it's actually fascinating to see all the stuff, everything quantified, right? So, almost like all the time that people have, essentially what people are doing in the space is that people just go through their TL and then see that, hey, like all of a sudden, a lot of people are talking about WIF, a lot of people are talking about various different kind of meme coins, and maybe, hey, there's a new meme coin popping up. But everything, like different from, I'll say the long term of other assets in crypto, or to some extent, those assets also, display some of the, a lot of the kind of mindshare and sentiment characteristics. But the meme coin is the most profound and pronounced in terms of huge correlation with sentiment tracking. So by actually tracking all the social discussions on meme coin, you can actually get a very, very good handle on which one is gaining traction, what is very popular, and when sentiment peaked and inflected, that certain things have inflected as well. Without being able to quantify all of these, you can actually get very lost in terms of just understanding the the foundations of all the meme coins. So that's number one. And number two is meme coins as a sector is also going through different waves, right? So at any single point in time, there are certain meme coins doing very well and certain meme coins doing not so well. But then meme coin as a sector is also kind of going through different waves. So what we're seeing by tracking all the meme coin social mentions, you can very, very clearly see that March this year was the peak of the meme coin. But then even today versus around about 6 months ago, even after the kind of the initial peak of the meme coin move up, meme coin actually, so the entire mind share of meme coin actually settled at a sustained higher level versus six months ago, which means that there's actually significant traction even after the initial kind of a cool down period after the kind of the peak at March. So that's also very interesting to track, right? Because the whole sector is actually going through different waves. And a lot of other features that we are developing, so for example, smart following feature, it's when it kind of couples with sentiment and mindshare is actually a really powerful kind of whole research process, right? So think about a process very simply, you just be tracking all the Twitter followings or the new meme coins that are launching in the space, and then incrementally you'll be tracking, hey, what the social discussions and the meme coin tractions are. You can actually form a very robust strategy in terms of trading attentions and social signals. So a lot of the stuff that people are using KAITO for, not entirely kind of what we initially designed the product to be, but just turns out to be that, hey, all of a sudden people are discovering, hey, with a search engine, with a lot of the quantifiable metrics, you can actually do a lot of the things in the space.
That's interesting. So not that is a spatial metrics for meme coins, but more of the user insights for trading that users can use. So I think you mentioned earlier about the indexing of large unstructured data of Web3 from sources like Twitter and Discord. To get a better understanding here, like could you explain a bit more in terms of what data source you include or intentionally exclude in your platform? And given the complex nature of Web3 data, like how does KAITO handle it? Like, is there any challenge?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of challenge. And at the time that we started building KAITO, there's no similar product that ever existed in the market. And I'll say that Twitter is by far the most difficult source to curate and dynamically kind of index. And the most difficult part is, well, we're obviously not indexing the entire Twitter. And also at the same time, to define or to very clearly define what crypto Twitter is actually a very difficult task. So we actually pioneered in terms of building a dynamic social graph in the space, which effectively acts as the reputation layer for all the content on CT. Why that's important is because nowadays, whenever you do a search on Twitter, you often surface a lot of scams. And in the reply section is pretty much full of scams right now. And that is because in Twitter's algorithm, they don't have the underlying social graph for CT. So the only metric that they're prioritizing is engagement. So that's why a lot of the bots are able to kind of hack that in a way that they just have a lot of other bots like and engage with a particular content, and then they will surface. What we're doing differently is to build that social graph, and that social graph is dynamically curated on a daily basis, and then that essentially acts as a reputation layer for the content. So when people search on the platform, then you will only be surfacing all the relevant content, and that's kind of the most difficult part of the indexing job. But obviously, at the same time, there's a huge fragmentation of information, right? I think about thousands of Discord channels, so many Telegram channels, and obviously when it comes to like governance forum, all that kind of stuff. The other thing I also say is we also pioneered in building a Web3 tuned speech to text model. So before KAITO was in the industry, there was actually no transcript for any podcast, for any conference, for any Twitter space. But now we actually index and transcribe the entire space. So all the multimodal content, whether it's on audio and video format, everything is being transcribed on the platform. And we also just received a grant from Ethereum Foundation to open source all the Ethereum related multimodal content. So ECC, Denver, and DEFCON as well, which is coming up. All the public conferences, previously people interested in learning about these can only be watching very, very long, hundreds of hours of audio and video in the space, but now everything is available through transcript, and then we also lay on top of search engine. And then further, we're kind of now using, this is kind of the second part that we haven't talked about, but essentially we're using the Bitensor in decentralized AI network to actually do a lot of the data indexing and curation for that part of the business as well.
That's interesting. Building on that, I think another key challenge companies typically grapple with is the trade-off between prioritizing broad data coverage versus highly curated data sets. How do you ensure comprehensive coverage while maintaining a high signal-to-noise ratio?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Maybe I just using Twitter data as an example, right? So I just kind of explained in terms of the whole social graph analysis that we built, which is effectively the reputation layer. That's obviously on the curation part. How do we ensure that we have the best coverage is that we have a mechanism whereby if anyone outside of the inner circle tweets out something, as long as that gets engaged by any of the people within the inner circle, that tweet is also part of the search database. So this is this is a very, very efficient way for us to actually cover everything within the core space, but also expanding to anything that's interesting as well. So essentially, this is how we ensure that we have both very, very good coverage, but also very, very high signal.
Got it. It's been helpful to unpack the data part and the product details. Now, I'm really interested in taking a deeper dive into the AI and machine learning technique that power KAITO search under the hood. You touched briefly about being utilized like multimodal and knowledge graph. Could you explain more about this, including how you apply large language models to enhance the search and generate insights?
Yeah, so I often tell a lot of people, KAITO, a lot of people ask us that how many people are there in KAITO, and then told them it's around about 20 people. They're often very, very surprised because the Web2 equivalent of us would typically be more than 1,000 people. And the major difference of that is really how we approach everything in the space. And a large part of that is data cleaning and data labeling. And then even the iteration of the search improvement framework. So think about how Google back in the day would kind of iterate on the back of the search engine. They essentially just have a lot of the user click on certain links, and then they improve the algorithm on the back of that. But then now with large language model, you can actually just basically have two different algorithms, and then you do a search, and then you basically ask the large language model to compare the two different algorithms and label all these data, and then pick up the one that's better. And then you can iterate on the back of that to infinite number of times. So this is a very, very powerful kind of way of improving the internal algorithm in a way that was completely not possible before. At the same time, a lot of the stuff needs data labeling in the space. As for example, sentiment analytics. Back in the day, you had to train your own NLP model and then basically do sentiments. And then now you can actually do these very easily and with very, very high quality, as long as your data is clean. Right. So a lot of the kind of vertical use cases that we're now getting into are very, very, very interesting as well, which is not possible before. I can tell you some of the stuff. So for example, we just launched a Telegram channel, and over 10 days, we got 3,000 subscribers. That Telegram channel is completely for free. And it's called Overheard on CT. What it does every day is basically just looking at the entire space, all the chatters, and summarizing all the speculations that people have been talking about. So all the rumors and speculations, all that kind of stuff. But without a search engine, you're not able to do that. But even with a search engine, you are able to kind of curate the content, but then you need to manually go through a lot of that. It's a significant undertaking. But with a search engine that we built and with a large language model that we can tap into, you can essentially marry the two together and then do a really, really good job in terms of using the search engine to kind of narrow down to a curated set of information that you should pay attention to, and then leverage a large language model, which now has the capability of very, very long context window to essentially do a lot of the very, very interesting stuff. So it's a very easy job for us to kind of do kind of a speculation or chatters of the market very easily. And then over time, we can tap into so many different verticals, right? So for example, we can do a people movements of the day. Individual from, let's say, Polygon recently left for Barrier Chain, that kind of stuff. We can essentially very, very easily summarize and tap into each of the vertical very easily. And that's really only made possible by a large language model, but also kind of our infrastructure. And that's, one of the, secret sources of why KAITO is able to do all of these with kind of a 20 people team instead of a 1,000 people team.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you for to tackle this. It sounds like very complicated. Now I would like to shift gear to the go-to-market strategy. Like you mentioned that this is mentioned to serve institutions. Like who are your main target users here, and how do you plan to attract and retain them, given there are many insight providers in the market?
Yeah. So I'll say that I'll kind of cut the question in two parts. I'll say that today we mostly focus on institutions, but then we do have a plan to serve every single person in the market. That's kind of our retail product. But for the first part, in terms of how we're serving institutions and who are our target customers, so we serve pretty much everyone in the space, because if you think about all the major stakeholders in the space, right? So their funds and their project teams. These two are the biggest stakeholders in the game. And then we now cover both sides. And increasingly, project team is the fastest growing segment for us. And the reason why is, I think for the fund space is relatively straightforward because people need to do due diligence, research, understand tokens, all that kind of stuff. But then on the project side, that part is actually a use case that we had not imagined when we first started off KAITO. If I think about my background, I was managing a portfolio before. I was a trader, and I obviously built the platform so that people like myself would find it helpful, which proved to be the case because all the liquid funds are kind of using this. But at the same time, we now, over time, we're starting to get a lot of inbounds from project teams. Initially, with Ethereum Foundation, Flashbots, they were kind of more from a research perspective. And then all of a sudden, we get so many different kind of project teams reaching out to us and say that, hey, like we have huge needs for understanding who are talking about us, what's our token mindshare, what's our retail sentiment, all that kind of stuff. And currently, the only solution that they have is very generic Web2 solutions. We recently hired Alex, who used to be working at Binance. And then even for Web3 giants such as Binance, people only had access to generic Web2 solutions, which are tracking the total number of followers, the total number of likes, and all the replies, and hashtags, number of hashtags, all that kind of stuff. Everyone with a little bit of knowledge in the space would know that by tracking hashtags, it doesn't really mean anything. In the space, it's Web3 is operating on a completely different scale and completely different fashion as well. So we do need a Web3 specific tool that understands how the space works. And that is where KAITO comes in. Because we build a social graph at a reputation layer, and then we provide the best data in terms of quantifying token mindshare, quantifying sentiments, even providing some of the analysis, including decomposing your token mindshare, right? So tell you, hey, if your token mindshare is X right now, which accounts are primarily contributing to that token mindshare? How do you grow your token mindshare? How do you benchmark your token mindshare versus your competitors? So for that part, nobody currently is providing any solutions. So we're kind of the first mover in that game, and a lot of the project teams are increasingly adopting Kaito. So some of the recent ones include, obviously Ethereum, Polygon, Immutable, Eigenlayer, Ronin, and a lot of the kind of very big project teams are now starting to kind of adopt this Web3 specific tool to for social listening, sentiment tracking, all that kind of stuff. And then the second part of the business that we are currently developing is a completely retail focused product. And that's kind of on a decentralized architecture. So around about 2 months ago, we launched on Bitensa. And Bitensa is a decentralized AI network. And we're one of the top subnets there. What we're doing is decentralized crawling and indexing. So think about any query that anyone sends to the network would essentially ask our miners to crawl the information and then index it, i.e. to rank it, right? So whoever has the best indexing output would essentially get the higher rewards. So the next set of the product is essentially to lay on top this decentralized indexing network with a process intelligence network. So once you do that, essentially you can imagine a scenario whereby anyone can curate a bunch of information and ask the network to be curating this information and then create a dashboard. Right. So think about, it's fundamentally it's quite similar to June, right? So if you think about the idea, obviously June built up the entire data pipeline to essentially allow all the data scientists to be utilizing June SQL to kind of curate the entire space. You can come up with a dashboard for ETH staking. You can come up with a KPI for whatever key projects, etc. So that provides a really good retail interface for anyone to really understand the space in a much better manner. But then from the information side of things, there's currently no product doing that. And when anyone's coming to the space and ask us, hey, how do we get up to speed with the space? Currently, there's no very good way. You can't recommend this person some books. You have to ask the person to follow a bunch of people on Twitter. And then that person has to follow the right people on Twitter. You can't ask the person to kind of go through these governance forums to kind of stay on top of the market, go subscribe to these Telegram channels. It's a very, very broken onboarding process. What we're trying to do is to simplify the whole thing, and then essentially really just leveraging the community's power to essentially do every part of the business, right? So there's content curators which would essentially tell the network, hey, for this particular vertical, you should be crawling and indexing all these kind of type of information, and then all the miners would essentially utilize our subnet number 5 on Bitensa to then go and crawl and index all the content information. So then KAITO plays no part in that network. We're essentially just only responsible for setting up the network and setting up the reward mechanism, but then the entire thing is actually done by the community. So that's kind of the second step that we're kind of going to. It's not going to be a competing product. You'll be serving different audience. You'll be serving different purposes, but we do see that as a very viable way to essentially solve a lot of the, very different niche for the market and really make the product really scalable.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you try to capture the retail side with this partnership with Tensor. I think we have come down to maybe just one last word. Any recommendations you would like to give to crypto founders as they're trying to build AI capabilities?
I think some of the biggest opportunities are using AI to have a better user experience in crypto. I do think that a lot of the crypto apps currently don't really focus on that. There's a very, very little personalization that has been done in the space. I think that's a huge opportunity. And if you see some of the very successful D apps that recently got a lot of traction, a lot of that actually comes down to user experience. So I do think there's a huge differentiating factor if you can embed AI into the kind of the whole user journey design and user experience design. certain things that very easy in we're very used to kind of a Web 2 world, right? You pull up an app, there's a lot of recommendations, they understand who you are. When you try to call a taxi, then once you start typing, they don't recommend some stuff that you haven't searched before or that's like really far away, somewhere in America. So a lot of the personalization features are not really there in crypto. And I really just encourage all the founders to pay attention to that and leverage the latest technology to be building something that has the best user experience.
No, couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, you for sharing your insights in the web research. Thank you.
Great chatting to you today.